There is a class of weapon that exists at the intersection of portability and devastation. A weapon that a single soldier can carry in one hand, but that can change the outcome of an entire firefight in seconds. A weapon that compresses what used to require a mortar team, a crew-served weapon, and significant logistical support into something one person can operate alone, from behind cover in under 3 seconds between shots. For decades, grenade launchers existed in one of two forms: either a single-shot tube mounted under a rifle barrel, giving a soldier one explosive round before a slow, deliberate reload, or a crew-served automatic grenade launcher so heavy and so large it required a vehicle or a fixed mount and a dedicated team to operate it. Neither one solved the problem that infantry commanders kept running into on real battlefields: the problem of needing multiple grenades rapidly, delivered accurately, by a single soldier right now. That gap in capability existed for decades, and it took a South African engineer working during one of the most intense and brutal bush wars of the 20th century to finally close it. This is the story of the Milkor MGL, the 6-shot revolving grenade launcher that changed what a single soldier could do on the battlefield, and the weapon that American Special Operations Forces chose above everything else available when they needed exactly that capability. Let's start at the beginning. South Africa, in the late 1970s, was fighting a war that most of the world didn't fully understand. The South African Border War, sometimes called the Bush War, was a sprawling, grinding conflict fought across the vast terrain of southern Africa, through Angola, Namibia, and along borders that stretched for hundreds of miles, through some of the most remote and challenging terrain on the continent. South African forces were fighting a counterinsurgency campaign against SWAPO guerrilla fighters who had learned to use that terrain expertly, moving in small, fast groups, striking and disappearing before conventional forces could respond. In that environment, firepower concentration mattered enormously. The ability to immediately suppress a contact, to put explosive rounds on target fast before the enemy could break contact and melt back into the bush, was not a tactical luxury. It was survival. South African military engineers were watching their soldiers work with the single-shot grenade launcher solutions available at the time and identifying a fundamental capability gap: one shot, then a slow reload. Against a guerrilla force that moved quickly and dispersed rapidly, one grenade round often wasn't enough to fix the enemy in place long enough for follow-on action. What was needed was volume. Multiple grenade rounds, quickly, without the weight and crew requirements of a heavy weapons system. A South African engineer named Mekem, working under the Milkor Company, began developing a solution that drew its fundamental operating concept from somewhere most firearms engineers would never have looked for inspiration: a revolver. The concept was almost elegantly simple once someone thought of it. Revolvers had solved the problem of multiple shots from a single weapon for handguns over a century earlier. The rotating cylinder, preloaded with multiple rounds, advancing with each trigger pull to bring a fresh cartridge into alignment with the barrel. Why couldn't the same principle scale up to a grenade launcher? The engineering challenge was not trivial. A 40mm grenade round is substantially larger and heavier than a pistol cartridge. The forces involved in firing one are dramatically higher. The cylinder would need to be large enough to house 6 complete 40mm rounds, robust enough to handle the firing forces, and still light enough for a single soldier to carry and operate effectively. Milkor solved these problems methodically, and what emerged in 1983 was the MGL, the multiple grenade launcher, sometimes referred to by its NATO designation as the M32 in American service, or simply as the 6-shooter, by the soldiers who carried it. The cylinder, 6 chambers, each one housing a complete 40mm low-velocity grenade round. The cylinder advances with each trigger pull, bringing the next round into alignment with the barrel. From a fully loaded weapon, a trained operator can put all 6 grenades on target in under 3 seconds. That is 6 separate explosive detonations, within a radius of roughly 150 meters, delivered by one person in the time it takes to say the sentence you just heard. Let's talk about the ammunition. Because understanding what 40mm grenade rounds can do is essential to understanding why this weapon matters. The standard 40mm high-explosive round detonates on impact and produces lethal fragmentation out to approximately 5 meters, with a casualty-producing radius significantly beyond that. But 40mm is a family of ammunition, not a single round. The same weapon that fires a high-explosive fragmentation grenade can fire smoke rounds for marking or screening, illumination rounds that deploy a parachute flare to light up a nighttime battlefield, less than lethal baton rounds for riot control, buckshot rounds that turn the weapon into a devastating close-range shotgun effect, door-breaching rounds that blow locks and hinges off fortified entries, and a range of specialty rounds including thermobaric warheads, CS gas canisters, and marker rounds that have been developed over the decades since the MGL entered service. This ammunition versatility is one of the weapon's most significant tactical advantages. A soldier carrying the MGL doesn't just carry an explosive delivery system. They carry a configurable effects package capable of producing smoke, light, concussion, fragmentation, or non-lethal force depending on what the situation demands, all from the same launcher, loaded in whatever combination the mission requires. A squad leader preparing for a mission might load 2 high-explosive rounds, 2 smoke rounds, and 2 illumination rounds, or 6 high-explosive if they're expecting a hard contact, or a mix of less-than-lethal and breaching rounds for an arrest operation in a populated area. The cylinder accepts whatever combination of 40mm rounds the operator chooses to load, making the weapon genuinely adaptable in a way that single-purpose weapon systems simply cannot match. The operating mechanism deserves specific attention because it's what separates this weapon from everything else in its category. The trigger mechanism is double action only, meaning each trigger pull both advances the cylinder and fires the round. There is no manual cocking step. You acquire the target, you pull the trigger, the cylinder advances, the round fires, pull again. The cylinder advances again. Another round fires. At the rate a trained operator can pull that trigger, 6 rounds can be downrange before the smoke of the first detonation has cleared. The cylinder itself is spring-loaded, pre-tensioned when the rounds are loaded, and that stored spring tension is what drives the cylinder's rotation. This is a mechanically elegant solution because it means the cylinder advancement is driven by stored mechanical energy rather than gas operation or any externally powered system, keeping the mechanism simple, robust, and highly reliable even after exposure to the dirt, sand, water, and abuse that field conditions inevitably produce. Loading the MGL requires opening the cylinder, which swings out to the side similar to a revolver, loading each of the 6 chambers individually, closing and latching the cylinder, and cocking the spring tension mechanism. A trained operator can complete a full reload in roughly 8 to 14 seconds depending on conditions, which is significantly faster than any crew-served grenade weapon system and broadly competitive with single-shot launchers when you account for the 6 rounds delivered before that reload becomes necessary. The effective range of the MGL firing standard 40mm high-velocity rounds reaches out to approximately 375 meters for point targets, with area fire capability extending further depending on the round type and firing angle. The weapon's barrel can be elevated significantly for indirect fire, allowing the operator to arc rounds over intervening terrain to strike targets in defilated positions, those hiding behind ridgelines or in gullies where direct fire weapons can't reach them. The sight systems fitted to the MGL have evolved considerably over its service life. Early models used relatively simple ladder sights. Modern variants used in American service use the Advanced Fire Control System, a sophisticated computerized sighting system that integrates a laser rangefinder with a ballistic computer that automatically calculates the correct aiming solution for whatever range the laser determines, dramatically improving first-round hit probability, even against moving or partially concealed targets. Now let's talk about how this South African weapon ended up in the hands of American Special Operations Forces, because that story tells you something important about how the American military evaluates capability. the Department of Defense began formal evaluation of the MGL concept, and in 2003, the M32 MGL was adopted by United States Marine Corps Special Operations elements, followed by broader Special Operations adoption across Army Special Forces, Rangers, and other elite units. The American version went through several refinements from the original Milkor design, including updated materials, improved sighting systems, and modifications to meet American military specifications. But the fundamental mechanism, the revolving six-shot cylinder, remained exactly as the South African engineers had designed it in 1983. American Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan and Iraq found the weapon immediately and profoundly useful in exactly the situations its designers had imagined decades earlier. In the complex terrain of Afghanistan, where insurgent forces would initiate contact from elevated positions and then attempt to break contact and withdraw through ravines and mountain passes, the ability to immediately put 6 grenade rounds on a contact point before the enemy could move was a genuine tactical multiplier. In Iraq's urban environment, the weapon's versatility across different ammunition types proved equally valuable. A patrol that might encounter a checkpoint ambush, a building breach requirement, and a crowd control situation within the same hour could carry a configured mix of rounds for each contingency in that same 6-round cylinder. Combat reports from American forces using the M32 in both theaters described the psychological effect of the weapon on enemy fighters, who had learned to expect 1 or 2 grenade rounds in a contact, followed by a pause for reloading. The sustained rapid-fire capability produced an effect on enemy behavior that went beyond the purely physical damage of the rounds themselves. The sound of a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth detonation, arriving in rapid succession from a single soldier's position, fundamentally disrupted the tactical calculations of enemy fighters, who had planned their contact around a single-shot response capability. The weapon has continued to evolve. The MGL Make-1S variant introduced a shorter barrel option for more compact carry in vehicle operations. The M32A1 update for American forces improved the folding stock system and added full rail integration for modern accessories. International customers, including the United Kingdom, India, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Georgia, and dozens of other nations have adopted variants of the Milkor MGL, making it one of the most widely distributed specialized infantry weapons of the past 4 decades. Beyond conventional military use, the MGL has found significant adoption among law enforcement special response teams and internal security forces in countries where high-intensity civil disturbance is a realistic planning scenario. The ability to rapidly deliver multiple less-than-lethal rounds, smoke rounds, and CS gas canisters from a single weapon in a controlled sequence without reloading fills a specific law enforcement niche that no other weapon system addresses as effectively. What the Milkor MGL represents in the broader history of infantry weapons is something that doesn't happen as often as people assume in firearms development. It represents the identification of a genuine capability gap, the application of an unconventional solution borrowed from a completely different class of weapon, and the execution of that solution well enough that the fundamental design has survived for over 4 decades without requiring fundamental redesign. The revolving cylinder concept worked for handguns for over a century because it was mechanically sound, simple, and reliable. Applied at the scale of a grenade launcher, it worked for exactly the same reasons. The engineering team at Milkor didn't try to solve the problem of rapid grenade fire with gas operation, with belt feeds, with electronic systems, or with any of the complex mechanisms that might seem more sophisticated. They asked what the simplest mechanical solution to the problem would be, and they built that. The result was a weapon that a soldier in 1983 could understand, operate, maintain, and trust in the field, and that a soldier in 2024 still carries into combat with confidence for exactly the same reasons. When the United States military, with access to every domestic and international weapons system available, and with the budgets and procurement processes to adopt whatever they chose, looked at the problem of individual grenade fire, and decided that a South African revolving grenade launcher was the right answer. That was a meaningful endorsement, not of complexity, not of technological sophistication for its own sake, of a clean, mechanically sound solution to a real problem. That is what the Milkor MGL is. 6 shots, 3 seconds, 1 soldier. And for 4 decades, on battlefields across the world, that has been exactly enough.